Annie Rodriguez stands in the federal courthouse on a cold December morning. Her hands are no longer shaking as she watches federal judge William Harrison being led away in handcuffs. Billy Harrison screams from the defendant's table. His voice cracks with desperation as FBI agents surround his father. "You can't do this to us," Billy shouts. His perfect blonde hair is disheveled. His expensive suit wrinkled from 3 days in custody. "We own this town. We own all of you." But 6 weeks ago, Annie thought her biggest challenge would be teaching advanced chemistry to entitled teenagers. She had no idea that Billy Harrison was about to turn her quiet life into a nightmare. What Billy couldn't see beneath Annie's calm exterior was 5 years of FBI forensic training and an IQ that had solved 47 federal cases, and he was about to learn exactly what happens when privilege meets a woman who refuses to be silenced. The memory feels like yesterday, Annie walking into Westbrook Academy for the first time, clutching her leather briefcase filled with lesson plans. The Gothic building stretched across 15 acres of manicured lawns, crystal chandeliers hung in hallways where oil paintings of dead headmasters watched students hurry to class. She wore a simple black blazer and navy pants. Her appearance was professional but unremarkable compared to the designer uniforms surrounding her. Principal Eugene Walker had greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His handshake was brief and dismissive. "Miss Rodriguez, welcome to Westbrook," he said. His voice carried the practiced charm of someone accustomed to managing wealthy donors. "Our students come from very influential families." He continued, "I trust you understand the importance of maintaining positive relationships with our benefactors." And the chemistry laboratory occupied the entire third floor. State-of-the-art equipment lined the walls, while safety posters reminded students about proper protective gear. Annie arrived early that first morning. She arranged beakers and test tubes in precise rows while reviewing her notes one final time. At 8:30 a.m., students began filtering into the classroom. Their conversations died when they noticed the new teacher. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of justice. And hey, if these stories inspire you as much as they inspire me to tell them, consider hitting the thanks button below. Your support helps me continue sharing these powerful moments that need to be heard. Thank you so much for being here with me. "Good morning, everyone," Annie began. Her voice carried easily across the laboratory as students took their assigned seats. "I'm Miss Rodriguez, and I'll be your chemistry instructor this semester." She moved to the whiteboard. Her handwriting was neat and precise as she outlined the day's lesson plan. A hand shot up near the back of the room. Annie looked up to see a tall boy with piercing blue eyes and perfectly styled blonde hair. His uniform was immaculate. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and his family crest adorned his blazer pocket. "Yes," Annie said. She set down her marker and gave him her full attention. "I'm Billy Harrison," he announced. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything. "My father is Federal Judge Harrison," he continued. "He serves on the board that oversees this school's funding." Billy leaned back in his chair. His smirk suggested he expected special treatment. Annie's expression didn't change. She had dealt with entitled criminals during her FBI years. "Nice to meet you, Billy," she replied. "Please save questions about the lesson until I finish explaining today's experiment." Several students exchanged glances. They weren't accustomed to seeing someone dismiss Billy Harrison so casually. Billy's smirk faltered. His blue eyes narrowed as he studied Annie more carefully. "Actually, I have concerns about your qualifications," he said. His voice took on a sharper edge. "You look pretty young to be teaching seniors." He continued, Are you sure you can handle dangerous chemicals around students? The classroom fell silent. Even students who were whispering moments earlier stopped talking to watch this confrontation unfold. Annie had faced down serial killers and organized crime bosses. She wouldn't be intimidated by a 17-year-old with daddy issues. I have a doctorate in chemistry from MIT, Annie responded. Her voice remained calm and professional. I also spent 5 years as a forensic analyst with the FBI. She continued, I think I can handle a high school chemistry class. She turned back to the whiteboard, dismissing Billy's challenge completely. Billy Harrison sat in stunned silence. No teacher had ever spoken to him like that before. His father's position ensured that faculty members treated him with deference. Principals and teachers alike knew that crossing the Harrison family meant losing their jobs. He exchanged glances with his two closest friends. Alfred Martinez and Roy Johnson shared his shock at this unexpected defiance. Alfred Martinez came from a family of prominent attorneys. His father represented major corporations, while his mother sat on the state Supreme Court. He was 16 years old. His dark hair was slicked back with expensive gel, and his watch cost more than most cars. Alfred had watched Billy manipulate teachers since elementary school. This was the first time he had seen someone refuse to bend. Roy Johnson's family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the East Coast. His trust fund exceeded $10 million, and he had never heard the word no applied to anything he wanted. He was 17, like Billy. His red hair and freckles gave him an innocent appearance that masked a cruel streak inherited from his corporate raider father. "Did she just dismiss you?" Alfred whispered, his voice barely audible above Annie's explanation of chemical bonds. Billy's jaw clenched. His hands formed fists under the laboratory table as he watched Annie continue her lesson without acknowledging his presence. "Nobody talks to me like that," Billy muttered. His voice carried a menacing undertone that made nearby students uncomfortable. "She has no idea who she's dealing with." He continued, "My father will have her fired before the week ends," and the lesson continued for another 40 minutes. Annie demonstrated how different chemical combinations created various reactions while students took notes and asked legitimate questions. Billy remained silent for the rest of class. His blue eyes never left Annie's face as he mentally catalogued every word she spoke. When the bell rang, students packed their belongings and filed toward the exit. Annie noticed that Billy and his friends lingered behind the others. "Miss Rodriguez," Billy called out. His voice had returned to its earlier confidence. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Annie looked up from her lesson notes. She recognized the predatory gleam in Billy's eyes from her FBI training. "Of course," she replied. "But make it quick. I have another class in 10 minutes." Alfred and Roy positioned themselves near the laboratory door. Their presence felt more like a blockade than casual conversation. Billy approached Annie's desk. He stopped just close enough to invade her personal space without making physical contact. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," he said. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "My father is very interested in the quality of education at Westbrook," he continued. "He likes to know that teachers understand their responsibilities." Annie set down her pen. She met Billy's stare without flinching. "My only responsibility is teaching chemistry," she replied. "Everything else is between you and the administration." She gathered her materials. Her movements were deliberate and unhurried, despite the tension in the room. "You know," Billy said. His voice dropped to a whisper that only Annie could hear. "Pretty young teachers sometimes have accidents in laboratories," he continued. "Chemicals can be very dangerous when handled by inexperienced people." His smile widened. The threat was unmistakable, even though his words remained technically innocent. Annie's training kicked in. She recognized a predator testing his prey's defenses. "Thank you for the safety reminder," she responded. Her voice remained perfectly steady. "I'll be sure to follow all proper protocols," she continued, "just like I learned during my 5 years analyzing crime scenes for the federal government." Billy's smile faltered. He didn't expect Annie to reference her FBI background so directly. "Crime scenes?" he asked. His voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. "What kind of crime scenes?" he continued. His earlier confidence began to waver slightly. "The kind where young men who think they're untouchable learn that actions have consequences." Annie replied. She closed her briefcase with a sharp click. "The kind where privilege doesn't protect predators from justice." She continued. Her dark eyes bore into Billy's blue ones. Over the following weeks, Billy's harassment escalated with methodical precision. He had clearly done this before to other teachers. It started with sexist comments during class. Billy would make loud observations about Annie being too emotional to handle male students or too inexperienced to understand real chemistry. When Annie ignored these provocations, he moved to public humiliation. During lunch periods, Billy would gather crowds in the cafeteria. He told elaborate stories about Annie's inappropriate behavior toward male students. "She keeps staring at us during experiments," he would say. His voice carried just enough concern to sound believable. "Maybe she chose teaching because she likes being around teenage boys," he continued. His implications were clear without being explicitly stated. The rumors spread quickly through Westbrook's social hierarchy. Students who had never spoken to Annie began avoiding her in hallways. Parents started asking questions during school board meetings. They wondered why such a young and inexperienced teacher had been hired to work with their sons. Principal Walker called Annie into his office twice. Both times, he suggested she might consider adjusting her teaching style to better suit their student body. Annie documented every incident. Her FBI training had taught her to create paper trails when dealing with predators. She kept detailed records of Billy's comments, the timing of his provocations, and the administration's failure to address his behavior. More troubling was her discovery that 3 previous female teachers had resigned from Westbrook under similar circumstances. The escalation took a darker turn when Annie found her car vandalized in the faculty parking lot. All 4 tires had been slashed, and "bitch" was spray-painted across her windshield in red letters. Security cameras covering that section had mysteriously malfunctioned. Principal Walker suggested it was probably random vandalism unrelated to any school conflicts. Detective Russell Davis arrived to investigate. His perfunctory examination consisted of taking a few photos and asking superficial questions. Probably just kids being kids. He concluded. His dismissive tone suggested he wouldn't pursue any leads. These things usually blow over if you don't make a big deal about them. Annie recognized something familiar in Davis's attitude, the same protective instinct she had seen corrupt officials display when wealthy suspects were involved. "Detective Davis," she said. Her voice carried subtle authority. "I'm a former FBI agent." She continued. "I know what a proper investigation looks like, and this isn't it." Davis's expression shifted. He suddenly became very interested in his notebook. "FBI, huh?" he asked. His voice betrayed nervousness. "What kind of cases did you work?" he continued. Sweat beads formed on his forehead despite the cool October air. "Public corruption," Annie replied. She watched Davis carefully for his reaction. "Officials who abuse their authority to protect criminals," she continued. "The Bureau takes those cases very seriously." Davis closed his notebook. He suddenly seemed eager to leave the school grounds. That evening, Annie received an unexpected visitor. Sarah Patterson knocked on her apartment door with trembling hands. Miss Rodriguez, she asked. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I used to teach at Westbrook, she continued. I heard about your confrontation with Billy Harrison. Annie invited Sarah inside. She immediately recognized the signs of trauma that she had seen in countless FBI interviews. Sarah was 32 years old. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and dark circles under her eyes suggested months of sleepless nights. She clutched a manila folder filled with documents and photographs. I wanted to warn you, Sarah said. Her hands shook as she sat on Annie's couch. Billy Harrison is more dangerous than he appears, she continued. That boy has destroyed 3 teachers' careers, and his father covered it all up. Sarah's voice cracked. Tears threatened to spill from her green eyes. What happened to you? Annie asked. Her FBI training guided her to speak gently with trauma victims. The personnel records mention philosophical differences, she continued. But I'm guessing the truth is more complicated. Sarah's composure crumbled. She opened the manila folder to reveal photographs of bruises on her throat and wrists. Billy cornered me in the supply closet after school one day, she whispered. He had Alfred Martinez and Roy Johnson with him. Her hand unconsciously moved to her neck. They said teachers needed to learn respect for their superiors. Annie's blood ran cold. She recognized the signs of sexual assault trauma from dozens of federal cases. Did they hurt you? She asked. Her voice carried the gentle authority of someone trained to interview victims. Sarah, you can tell me anything. She continued. I won't judge you, and I might be able to help. Billy grabbed my throat while the others held my arms. Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. He said his father would destroy my career if I ever reported what happened. She continued. Then he... She couldn't finish the sentence. The memory overwhelmed her ability to speak. Annie reached across the coffee table. She gently touched Sarah's shoulder in a gesture of support. Did you report this to anyone? She asked, though she already suspected the answer. Did you go to the police? Or the administration? She continued. Her investigative mind was already analyzing the pattern of predatory behavior. I tried, Sarah replied. Her tears had stopped, replaced by bitter anger. Principal Walker said boys will be boys, she continued. He suggested I might be happier at a different school. She laughed. It was a harsh sound, devoid of humor. Detective Davis said there wasn't enough evidence to pursue charges, she added. The same detective who investigated your vandalism. Annie made mental notes about the corruption network protecting Billy Harrison. It extended from the school administration to local law enforcement. What happened next? She asked, though Sarah's presence suggested she ultimately left Westbrook Academy. Judge Harrison called me personally, Sarah whispered. Her voice trembled with remembered fear. He said his son was destined for great things. She continued. He reminded me that false accusations could ruin my teaching career permanently. She met Annie's eyes. So I resigned and moved to a different state. Annie's FBI instincts were screaming. This wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a systematic pattern of predatory behavior protected by institutional corruption. Sarah, she said. Her voice carried the weight of her federal training. How many other teachers has this happened to? She continued. How many other victims are out there? Sarah's expression hardened. At least 2 others that I know of, she replied. Maybe more. She continued. Billy Harrison is a sexual predator, and his father uses the legal system to protect him. She stood to leave. I came here because you're the first teacher who stood up to him publicly. Wait, Annie called out. She couldn't let this opportunity slip away. Sarah, would you be willing to give an official statement? She asked. I still have contacts in federal law enforcement. She continued. If we can establish a pattern of behavior, We might be able to build a case. Yara paused at the apartment door. Hope and fear warred across her expression. "You really think someone would listen?" she asked. "You think the FBI would investigate a federal judge's son?" she continued. Her voice carried years of accumulated frustration. "The FBI investigates corruption wherever they find it." Annie replied, "Especially when it involves public officials abusing their authority." She handed Sarah a business card. "Think about it. If Billy Harrison hurt you and others, he'll keep hurting people until someone stops him." That night, Annie called her former partner, Agent James Crawford. The secure line connected after 2 rings. "Crawford," his familiar voice answered. Background noise suggested he was still at the office despite the late hour. "James, it's Annie," she said, settling at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee. "I need a favor," she continued. "How much do you know about federal judge William Harrison?" She could hear Crawford typing. He was already running searches through FBI databases. "Harrison, William Charles." Crawford read. His voice carried the professional tone of someone reviewing classified information. "Federal judge for 15 years, appointed by President Morrison." He continued, "Clean public record, but there have been whispers about his rulings in organized crime cases." Annie's pulse quickened. Organized crime connections often indicated deeper corruption. "What kind of whispers?" she asked. Her investigative instincts were fully engaged now. "Are we talking about bias or actual corruption?" she continued. "The distinction could determine whether federal intervention was possible. 3 major mob trials in the past 5 years resulted in acquittals or reduced sentences." Crawford explained. Defense attorneys in those cases made unusually large donations to Harrison's favorite charities. He paused. "Nothing we could prove in court, but the pattern raised some eyebrows." "James," Annie said. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "I think Harrison's son is a serial sexual predator," she continued. "And I think Daddy has been using his judicial influence to cover it up." She explained her conversation with Sarah Patterson. Crawford's silence indicated he was taking detailed notes. "That's a serious accusation, Annie," Crawford finally responded. "Investigating a federal judge requires approval from very high levels," he sighed. "But if you're right about a pattern of sexual assault, we might have grounds for a civil rights investigation." And the confrontation Annie had been dreading finally arrived on a Friday afternoon in late October. She was working alone in her chemistry laboratory, preparing experiments for the following week. The building was nearly empty. Most students and faculty had left for the weekend by 4 p.m. Annie was measuring chemical solutions when she heard footsteps in the hallway. The sound echoed off empty walls as 3 figures approached her laboratory door. She looked up from her work. Billy Harrison entered first, followed by Alfred Martinez and Roy Johnson. Their expressions carried a predatory confidence that made Annie's FBI instincts scream warnings. "Miss Rodriguez," Billy said. His voice carried false friendliness that didn't mask his sinister intentions. "We need to have a serious conversation about your attitude," he continued. Alfred and Roy positioned themselves to block the laboratory exits. "About showing proper respect to your betters." And Annie's training kicked in immediately. She assessed escape routes and potential weapons within reach. Chemical supplies lined the walls. Her knowledge of molecular interactions could prove useful if this confrontation escalated. "School's over, boys," she said. Her voice remained steady. "You should head home to your families." "Actually," Billy replied. His mask of civility dropped completely. "We think you should learn what happens to teachers who don't know their place." He continued, his hands clenched into fists as he approached Annie's workstation. "You embarrassed me in front of the entire class," he added. Rage distorted his handsome features. Roy moved to secure the main exit. His pale eyes reflected the fluorescent lighting as he grinned with anticipation. "My dad says women like you need to be taught respect," he said. His voice carried the entitled cruelty of someone who had never faced consequences. "Especially pretty young teachers who think they're smarter than everyone else." Alfred pulled out his phone. He began recording as Billy closed the distance between himself and Annie. "This is going to be educational," Alfred said. His camera captured every angle as Billy reached for Annie's throat. "For everyone who thinks they can disrespect the Harrison family." Billy's hands closed around Annie's throat from behind. His grip was surprisingly strong for a 17-year-old as he lifted her slightly off the ground. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he whispered. His breath was hot against her ear. "My father owns this town," he continued. "And now I own you." Annie's FBI hand-to-hand combat training activated automatically. She drove her elbow backward into Billy's solar plexus while simultaneously grabbing a beaker of hydrochloric acid from her workstation. Billy's grip loosened. He staggered backward as Annie spun to face her attackers with the chemical solution raised defensively. "Bad choice, boys," Annie said. Her voice carried deadly calm as she held the diluted acid at shoulder height. Roy rushed forward. Annie threw the solution directly at his face and hands. The chemical burned his skin. He screamed and stumbled backward into laboratory equipment while clutching his reddened cheeks. Alfred continued recording on his phone. His camera captured Billy's shocked expression as Annie grabbed a Bunsen burner and ignited a stream of alcohol solution. Blue flames leaped across the laboratory table. The fire created a barrier between Annie and her remaining attackers. "You picked the wrong teacher to terrorize," she said. Chemical smoke filled the air around them. Billy touched his neck where acid droplets had splashed during the struggle. His perfect features now bore red welts that would require medical attention. "You psycho bitch!" he screamed. His voice cracked with pain and disbelief. "I'll have you arrested for assault!" He continued. Blood seeped from scratches where Annie's nails had caught his throat during her escape. "Self-defense," Annie replied. She maintained her position behind the flaming barrier while reaching for her phone. 3 male students attacking a female teacher," she continued. "Any jury will understand my response." She held up her device. "Now get out before I call the police and report an attempted sexual assault." The 3 boys retreated toward the laboratory door. Alfred's recording captured their humiliating defeat as they stumbled over overturned chairs. Billy turned back once, his burned face twisted with rage and wounded pride. "This isn't over," he promised. His voice carried the venom of someone unused to losing. "You have no idea what you've started." Within hours, Annie discovered the true extent of the Harrison family's influence. Alfred's technical skills had transformed their humiliating defeat into a propaganda victory. The video titled "Psycho Teacher Attacks Innocent Students" appeared across multiple social media platforms. Clever editing removed all context of Billy's initial assault and made Annie appear unhinged. The manipulated footage showed Annie apparently creating chemical weapons while 3 students cowered in fear. Billy's voiceover narration described how their concerned teacher conference turned violent when Annie snapped without warning. The editing was sophisticated. It required professional-grade software and expertise that went far beyond typical teenage capabilities. Principal Walker called Annie's cell phone within an hour. His voice carried triumphant satisfaction that suggested he had been waiting for this moment. "Miss Rodriguez," he said, "you're suspended immediately pending a full investigation." His tone made clear that the administration had already decided her guilt. Security will escort you from the building tomorrow morning. But Annie's FBI training had prepared her for information warfare. She immediately began documenting evidence of the video's manipulation. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed inconsistencies in lighting and audio synchronization. The metadata showed multiple editing sessions using professional deepfake technology. Someone with serious resources was helping Billy Harrison destroy her reputation. That evening, Annie called Agent Crawford again. Her voice carried the focused intensity of someone preparing for battle. "James, they've escalated," she said. "Billy Harrison and his friends attacked me in the chemistry lab." She explained the assault and the subsequent video manipulation. Crawford's typing became rapid and urgent. "Annie, you need to be very careful," Crawford warned. His voice carried genuine concern. "If this family has access to professional propaganda tools, they're connected to serious players." He paused. "But the video manipulation might be our break. Creating false evidence to frame a federal agent is a serious federal crime." "I need more than that," Annie replied. Her investigative instincts were fully engaged now. "I want to build a case that brings down the entire network," she continued. "Sarah Patterson was just the beginning. There have to be other victims." Annie spent the weekend conducting her own investigation. Her FBI contacts provided access to sealed records and confidential databases that revealed the true scope of the Harrison corruption network. Judge William Harrison had dismissed or reduced sentences in over 24 cases involving wealthy defendants. Many of those same defendants had made substantial donations to Harrison's political campaigns. More disturbing were the juvenile records. Billy Harrison had been involved in incidents at 3 previous schools, each time resulting in transfers rather than prosecutions. The pattern suggested a systematic cover-up that extended back years. Annie recognized the hallmarks of organized criminal protection. On Monday morning, Annie drove to Sarah Patterson's new apartment in a neighboring state. She needed Sarah's testimony to establish the pattern of predatory behavior. Sarah's living situation revealed the true cost of crossing the Harrison family. She occupied a small studio apartment and worked as a waitress despite having a master's degree in education. "They destroyed my career," Sarah said. Her voice carried the hollow tone of someone who had lost everything. "No school district will hire me," she continued. "Judge Harrison's influence reaches farther than I ever imagined." She showed Annie threatening letters that had followed her across state lines. The message was clear that reporting Billy's assault would bring continued harassment. "Sarah," Annie said. Her voice carried the authority of her federal training. "I'm building a case that will end this," she continued. "But I need your help to establish the pattern." She explained her FBI connections and the evidence of video manipulation. For the first time in months, hope flickered in Sarah's eyes. "There are 2 other victims," Sarah revealed, her voice strengthened with newfound determination. "Lisa Cooper and Jennifer Walsh," she continued. "Both left teaching after incidents with Billy." She provided contact information. "If you can convince them to come forward, we might have enough for federal charges." Annie spent the following week locating and interviewing the other victims. Each conversation revealed additional layers of the Harrison family's corruption. Lisa Cooper had been a mathematics teacher. Billy's assault had occurred during a parent conference when Judge Harrison was present. The judge had personally threatened Lisa with career destruction if she reported his son's behavior. Jennifer Walsh taught English literature. Her incident had involved Billy and his friends cornering her in the school parking garage. Detective Russell Davis had investigated her complaint. His report concluded that Jennifer was emotionally unstable and seeking attention through false accusations. The detective's bias was so obvious that it suggested direct payment from the Harrison family. Each victim had suffered years of harassment after leaving Westbrook Academy. Their teaching licenses had been quietly revoked through administrative channels, and their personal reputations had been systematically destroyed. The Harrison Network's reach extended into state education departments and professional licensing boards. They had created a system that silenced victims and protected predators. Annie documented every detail. Her FBI training guided her in building an airtight case file that could withstand legal challenges. She also discovered that Alfred Martinez's father was the attorney who had handled all of Billy's previous incidents. The corruption extended through multiple professional networks that protected wealthy families from consequences. Agent Crawford reviewed Annie's evidence during a secure video call. His expression grew increasingly serious as she presented each piece of documentation. "This is bigger than we thought," he said. His voice carried the weight of someone recognizing a major federal case. "The Harrison Network involves judicial corruption, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice across state lines." "Let me see," Annie said. Her voice carried deadly determination. "I want to take them all down." She continued, "Not just Billy, but everyone who enabled him." She leaned into the camera. "These people have been destroying women's lives for years. It's time for justice." The federal investigation began quietly. Agent Crawford obtained surveillance warrants that revealed the true extent of the Harrison corruption network. Judge Harrison's chambers had been equipped with recording devices that captured conversations about bribes and case fixing. His phone records showed regular communication with organized crime figures and corrupt politicians. Annie continued teaching despite her suspension. She refused to abandon her students while the investigation proceeded. Principal Walker grew increasingly nervous as federal agents began appearing around Westbrook Academy. He attempted to negotiate a quiet resolution that would protect the school's reputation. Billy Harrison's behavior became erratic as pressure mounted. He sensed that his family's protection was weakening, but didn't understand why. His attacks on Annie escalated to public confrontations. He would corner her in school hallways while his friends recorded their encounters for social media. "You think you're so smart," Billy sneered during one hallway confrontation. His voice carried the desperation of someone losing control. "My father will destroy you," he continued. "He's done it before, and he'll do it again." His threats had become more explicit. Annie recognized the signs of a predator who felt cornered. The breakthrough came when FBI surveillance captured Judge Harrison meeting with Vincent Romano, a known organized crime boss. Their conversation revealed that Harrison had been fixing criminal cases in exchange for political support and campaign contributions. The recording provided evidence of corruption that reached far beyond sexual assault cover-ups. Annie received the call from Agent Crawford on a Thursday evening. His voice carried barely contained excitement. "We have enough," he said. "Federal prosecutors are preparing indictments for the entire network." He paused. "Annie, this is going to be huge. Judge Harrison, his son, Detective Davis, Principal Walker, they're all going down." "When?" Annie asked. Her voice was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "When do we move?" she continued. 5 months of investigation and preparation had led to this moment. "Tomorrow morning," Crawford replied. "Federal marshals will arrest Judge Harrison during court proceedings." His voice hardened. "Billy and his friends will be taken into custody at school. We want maximum public impact to ensure the message reaches every potential victim." Friday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth. Annie stood in her chemistry laboratory as federal agents surrounded Westbrook Academy. Through her window, she watched black SUVs arrive as FBI teams prepared to execute arrest warrants that would destroy the Harrison corruption network. At exactly 10 a.m., The laboratory door opened. Agent Crawford entered with two federal marshals. "Annie Rodriguez," he announced formally, "you're needed as a witness in the federal prosecution of William Harrison and Associates." His official tone was for recording purposes. His smile conveyed personal satisfaction at finally achieving justice. Billy Harrison was arrested in calculus class. Students recorded his shocked expression as federal agents placed him in handcuffs while reading charges of sexual assault, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. His father was simultaneously arrested in federal court. Judge Harrison's robes couldn't protect him from the consequences of years of corruption. The courthouse steps became a media circus. Reporters shouted questions as Annie emerged with federal prosecutors. "Miss Rodriguez," one journalist called out, "how does it feel to take down a federal judge?" Annie's response was measured. "Justice isn't about taking anyone down. It's about protecting future victims from predators who think they're above the law." Principal Walker resigned that afternoon. His resignation letter cited philosophical differences with the school's direction. But federal investigators were already reviewing his financial records. Detective Davis was arrested at his home. His bank accounts revealed payments that coincided perfectly with cases involving wealthy defendants. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Annie's testimony was devastating as she described the systematic pattern of assault and cover-up that had protected Billy Harrison for years. Sarah Patterson, Lisa Cooper, and Jennifer Walsh all testified about their experiences. Their courage in coming forward inspired dozens of other victims to contact federal prosecutors. Billy Harrison broke down during his testimony. Faced with life imprisonment, he confessed to assaulting multiple victims and named other wealthy students who had participated in similar crimes. His father's influence couldn't protect him from federal justice. He received 25 years in federal prison. Judge Harrison was sentenced to 15 years for corruption and obstruction of justice. His judicial career ended in disgrace as investigators uncovered evidence of hundreds of compromised cases. The federal investigation expanded to include other corrupt officials. Annie's case had exposed a network that reached into the highest levels of state government. Annie returned to her chemistry laboratory. The federal prosecutors had offered her a position as a special agent focusing on public corruption cases. The irony wasn't lost on her. Billy Harrison's attack had transformed her from a quiet teacher into a federal prosecutor specializing in exactly the type of crimes he had committed. 6 months after the arrests, Annie received a letter from a student at another private school. The girl described harassment by wealthy classmates whose families held positions of authority. "Miss Rodriguez," the letter concluded, "I heard what you did to Billy Harrison. Can you help us too?" Annie smiled as she reached for her phone. Agent Crawford would be very interested in this new case. Justice wasn't a one-time event, but an ongoing battle. Fortunately, she had discovered that she was very good at fighting battles that protected the vulnerable from those who abused power. The federal investigation had revealed something troubling. Billy Harrison's behavior wasn't unique, but part of a broader pattern among wealthy families who used influence to protect their children from consequences. Annie's case had become a template for prosecutors across the country. Her methods were being taught at FBI training academies. As Annie packed her teaching materials for the final time, preparing to accept the federal prosecutor position, her phone rang with an unknown number. "Miss Rodriguez?" a young woman's voice asked. "My name is Detective Maria Santos with the Chicago Police Department." Her voice carried an urgency that immediately caught Annie's attention. "We have a situation here that sounds very familiar to your Billy Harrison case." Annie paused her packing. Her investigative instincts were already engaged. "What kind of situation?" "Detective Santos," she asked. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had successfully prosecuted federal corruption cases. "Multiple reports of sexual assault at an elite private school," Santos explained. Her voice carried frustration. "The perpetrators are connected to federal judges, politicians, and organized crime figures," she continued. "And someone has been systematically silencing victims using methods identical to the Harrison network." Annie's blood ran cold. The Harrison case hadn't been unique, but part of a national network of corruption and predatory behavior. "Detective Santos," she said, her voice hardened with determination. "I think we need to talk. There's something else you need to know." Santos continued, her voice dropped to a whisper. "We found evidence that suggests the Harrison network was just one cell in a much larger operation." She paused. "Annie, we're talking about a nationwide conspiracy involving dozens of federal judges, politicians, and law enforcement officials." Annie's hand gripped the phone tighter. The implications were staggering. "How many victims are we talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hundreds," Santos replied. "Maybe thousands across multiple states." Her voice carried a mixture of horror and determination. "And Annie, there's one more thing. The man coordinating this entire network goes by the code name the Chancellor," she continued. "We believe he's been operating for over 20 years. Annie stared out her laboratory window. Suddenly, her victory against Billy Harrison seemed like just the beginning of something much darker and more dangerous than she had ever imagined.